Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program. Each Sunday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Thai time, I share the teachings of the Buddha using this book as our guide, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, Volume 1. It's part of the Words of the Buddha book series, and today we're in Chapter 6, which is titled The Middle Way, Walking the Middle Way. We've been teaching now for over 2 months, helping you to start to build up your practice of the path to enlightenment to help you move the mind to this enlightened mental state where you can eliminate the pollutions of mind and start experiencing the peace and joy of the enlightened mind. Well, we've studied pretty deeply over the last couple of months, and now we're going to be studying something that is actually very simple for me to teach it to you. It'll probably take me all of about 5 or 10 minutes to teach it to you, and then I'll share a few examples to be able to help you understand it. Because this teaching, while it's very simple in delivering it and sharing it with you, it's very profound and very powerful when you start implementing it into your life. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining by Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, whether you've been joining regularly or this is your first time, or even if you're watching this on the replay, I'd like to welcome all of you to today's class. As we go and I share the teachings of the Middle Way with you, feel free to ask any and all questions that you like. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. Or you can, in Zoom, electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So once again, welcome to all of you guys. I'm going to use some visual aids to help me just share the teachings with you guys to help you understand what it is to walk the middle way. This teaching, as I mentioned, is very simple in its nature in terms of sharing it with you and helping you to understand it. It's very simple and very basic, but the real power comes in actually practicing it. So let me share with you what this teaching is in its simplicity, and then I'm going to give you the examples to help you be able to understand it, and then open up to any and all questions that you might have related to this particular teaching. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he taught in this aspect of the middle way. And where this comes from and where he derived it from is that he noticed that a musical instrument that has strings on it is very similar to the human mind itself. That a stringed instrument like this lute or sitar or maybe a guitar nowadays, a stringed instrument, if the string is really tight and you pluck the string, if it's too tight, then the musical instrument doesn't play the way that it was intended to play. It doesn't play beautiful music. But also, if the string is too loose and you pluck it, it doesn't play beautiful music. It doesn't play the way the instrument is intended to play. So therefore, it doesn't play beautiful music. And the Buddha observed that the human mind was the same way, that when you hold on to things really tightly with craving, desire, attachment, that the mind doesn't perform optimally. But also, if you were too loose or indifferent or dull or lethargic with things, the mind doesn't perform optimally there either. It's only when you fine-tune the mind and you bring it to the middle that it performs optimally, and you can experience the peace, the calm, the serenity, the contentedness and joy that is in the enlightened mind. You'll no longer experience the sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, stress, anxiety. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. There's focus, concentration, clarity of mind, and deep memory. Your personal and professional relationships will blossom, and you'll notice that you're not even in a bad mood anymore. You're always in a good mood. And this is because you fine-tune the mind. You've trained the mind to come to the middle. You've uprooted all these pollutions out of the mind, which are called the 10 fetters that the Buddha teaches, or sometimes we refer to them as pollutions or defilements or taints. And it's the Eightfold Path, which is the core central teaching of the Buddha that guides you in how to eliminate those pollutions. And as you're training your mind on this Eightfold Path, you're bringing the mind more and more to the middle, where it's not craving, it's not longing and yearning and chasing after the objects of its affection, but also you're not indifferent and just kind of lackluster and lazy and lethargic either. Because on either side of that, you're not going to feel peaceful and joyful. The mind is not performing optimally. But when you get these pollutions out of the mind and you can fine tune the mind and dial the mind in to the middle, you can experience the peace and the joy. That eightfold path that I taught last week, those are the 8 individual factors that you're dialing in closer and closer. The Buddha says very clearly in his teachings that the eightfold path is the middle way, that when you learn it, when you reflect on it to independently verify it, and you practice it, this is what's going to guide you to enlightenment. And this middle way is something that you not only practice in terms of the eightfold path, but you can apply this teaching to many different aspects of your life. So let me help you understand some different examples of how you can apply this teaching of not holding things real tight and chasing after things, but also not being dull and lethargic or lackluster either, because there where the mind's complacent, you're not going to feel peaceful and content there. So let me help you understand this. So let's just say you have a certain job that you're looking to obtain, that you've been working on developing your skills, and now you would like to apply for a particular job, and you found some different opportunities. Well, if you chased and chased and chased a career, if you were, really pushing your nose to the grindstone to get all kinds of training, to refine your resume, you're just chasing it, updating your CV obsessively, applying to all kinds of jobs and just tossing your CV out there, just chasing, wanting more money. Maybe you started in your career at a certain salary and now you just want more and more and more and more and more. Well, if you chase your career in that way, you're not going to feel peaceful and joyful and content, because you're chasing and chasing and chasing, and your mind can only be having those pleasant feelings of happiness and excitement if you get what you want. But if you don't get what you want, your mind will end up in the painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. So if you just chase your career, your mind is not in the middle. But also, if you were over here on the other side, where you were indifferent, you didn't really care less about how you grew and how you developed, you didn't really pay attention to certain skills or abilities that you're trying to cultivate, you weren't really conscious about the type of positions that you applied for and that you actually obtained. If you were just indifferent about your career, that isn't going to help you either, because you're not going to be able to provide for your basic necessities like food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. So chasing after more wealth and chasing a career, the mind's not going to be peaceful there. But being indifferent and really not paying attention to a career and trying to develop your skills and abilities, your mind in your life isn't going to be peaceful and joyful there either. So coming to the middle would be to gradually work towards continuous improvement in your skills and in your abilities, and gradually work towards developing your career, being conscious about how you're updating your CV or your resume, looking at very intentional applying to specific jobs, doing a very good, solid job in interviews, doing some follow-up phone calls or letters or emails in order to communicate with the company. This is an individual that's consciously moving forward and making wise decisions about their career. And if you just gradually work towards a certain goal, objective, or interest in this way, the mind can be peaceful. The mind can be joyful. It almost feels like the mind is taking a breath of fresh air when the mind is in the middle. Because when you're chasing, no matter what it is, whether it's a career or anything else, you're going to get exhausted. You'll get to the end of your day and feel completely exhausted and even burned out. And then if you're really lackluster and indifferent and kind of lethargic about pursuing certain goals or objectives, you're not going to feel like you have enthusiasm or motivation or encouragement in your life. So it's only when you're pursuing something like a career in the middle way that you're going to feel comfortable and content and joyful and feel like your life is well balanced. You can apply this not only to a career, but you can apply this to your family life too. If you had craving, desire, attachment, longing, yearning to spend time with your family, your friends, your coworkers, and you were just, having an excessive amount of time where you were spending time doing personal things with your friends, family, and other people, you have your life kind of maxed out in personal things. But also, if you spent time alone all the time and you were just kind of on your own all the time, this wouldn't be wise either, because you're not having interaction and social involvement with other people. So on either side, if you're excessively chasing after spending an exorbitant amount of time with lots of people, or if you're on the other side where you're just alone all the time, this isn't the middle way. You're not going to feel content and joyful and peaceful in either one of those situations. So you need to find this middle way where sometimes you spend time with your relatives or your family or your friends or other people that you enjoy spending time with. And then other times you spend time alone and having some relaxed time, and maybe going out to the movies by yourself, or going to dinner by yourself, or going to the mall or to a park, or on holiday or vacation or something like this, where you can fall in love with yourself and you can have this love and this genuine interest in this being who you are now, being well. So if you lived on either side of this, where you are excessively spending a lot of time with people, and that's what you did a significant amount of time throughout your day, your week, your month, you're not spending time alone to kind of look at your own mind, understand your thoughts, and kind of process what's going on around you. But if you spent an exorbitant amount of time by yourself, kind of alone in a cave for multiple years, that's not going to go well for you either, because you're not socializing and you're not practicing things like right intention, right speech, right action, and the other teachings on the Eightfold Path. So finding this middle where your life is well balanced in terms of things like your social life is really wise. And we could apply this to any number of different things. Maybe perhaps as part of our question period, you might have certain examples that you're trying to figure out where the middle is for yourself. And you might have questions that you're asking me to help you find this middle. But let me use this other example of some things that you're going to need to pursue in the middle way. Even this path to enlightenment and how to actually get to enlightenment, you're going to need to do it from the middle way. Because if you chase and chase and chase and chase and chase enlightenment, you're craving that peacefulness, you're craving that joy that you hear me talk about with the enlightened mental state. If you chased it obsessively and impulsively, chase this enlightened mental state, you won't get to it. So you need to restrain the mind and pull it back so you can find the middle. But also, if you were indifferent and you didn't do anything to do inner improvement, like coming to classes or listening to videos and reading books and doing meditation and talking with your teacher, if you weren't doing these kinds of things and you were just indifferent about your own individual growth, you're not going to see growth and development there either. So you need to find this middle way where you're gradually working towards the goal of improving the condition of your mind and the condition of your life through practicing the middle way as it relates to learning and developing your life practice. And as you're doing that, you'll feel like you've taken a breath of fresh air. Because if you're chasing after the enlightened mental state, you'll get exhausted and you'll burn out and you'll give up after a few weeks or a few months or whatever amount of time. But also, if you were indifferent and you didn't do anything to pursue continuous growth, you're not going to see growth there. You're just going to continue to degrade more and more and more. And as part of this middle way and pursuing the path to enlightenment, you learn things like practicing generosity, for example. This is something else that you need to practice from the middle way. Not only do you need to practice the middle way as it relates to attaining enlightenment as a whole, but each individual aspect of the path to enlightenment, you need to be able to find the middle way. So something like generosity, you've learned over time, and you'll see me teach when we get to chapter 10, that generosity is an important aspect of your practice, because you need to train the mind to let go, where you don't have craving, desire, attachment, because the mind can be very selfish and hold on to things very tightly. But if you learned about generosity and you started craving that and you started sharing, giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, and you're doing this excessively, maybe you're sharing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars with lots of different organizations, and you're sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources excessively. This isn't going to promote the most balanced lifestyle for you, and you might find it difficult to be able to provide for your own food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. But also, if you never practice generosity, your mind will be quite selfish because you'd be holding on to things very tightly and your mind would have craving, desire, attachment. So even with something like generosity, which is a teaching within the path to enlightenment, you need to find that middle way where you can practice your generosity of sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources more than is strictly required without any expectation of anything in return. And knowing that that's a goal, that's an objective, that's an interest that you have, and you gradually work towards it. And then as you're working towards that, and you find the middle way with something like generosity, you need to be attentive with your mindfulness, because as you find the middle with your generosity, and maybe you found the middle for right now, things can actually change in your life. So let's just say somebody was quite well off and maybe they're quite wealthy and maybe they're sharing maybe $200, $300, $400, $500 a month with different organizations. And maybe they're sharing 10 hours a month of their time. And now that's what feels like the middle for them at this particular time in their life. And now they go forward that way for several months or maybe even years. They're practicing generosity in that way. But now as life goes on and they start being affected by impermanence and they start experiencing impermanence, maybe their parents get sick and get ill and they need extra care. And it requires a certain amount of time, effort, energy, and resources to care for someone's parents. Or maybe their children are moving into a certain situation with their college or university or other needs that they have. And maybe an individual needs to throttle back their generosity in sharing with so many other people. And now maybe this $500 a month and this 10 hours a month isn't really the middle way for them anymore. You need to pay attention to that with your mindfulness. And now you need to kind of ebb and flow and kind of make adjustments based on impermanence. So while we talk about this middle way and it's this middle path, it's not actually a path that goes from point A directly to point B. When you understand the middle way, you understand that you can get on the middle way and you can start practicing this middle way and kind of walking down the path, and you're kind of on that straight part of the path at the very beginning. But then as you're affected by impermanence and various things are happening in your life, you need to be able to kind of ebb and flow with this impermanence and making your way to the mountain. But understand that this path kind of veers and shifts as you're making your way towards the mountain, that it's not going to be, figure out what your time is with your family now and then lock into that for the rest of your life, or find out how you're going to do that as you ebb and flow through life. You should feel like when you're walking the middle way that things are effortless, that things are very peaceful in your life. They're very comfortable. You have things well balanced. You don't feel exhausted. For an enlightened being, at the end of their day, they're not exhausted. At any point during their day, they're not exhausted. But for an individual who's not in the middle with the mind being unenlightened, if there's cravings in the mind, you're going to be chasing those. And in some situations, you'll get what you want, which you'll get those conditioned pleasant feelings. But in some situations, you won't get what you want, and you'll get those painful feelings of sadness, anger, frustration, and others. And the mind throughout the day is going up and down and up and down. And you can get to the end of your day and feel completely exhausted, like you have bricks on your feet or your ankles, or you have bricks on your shoulders, and you come home and you just plop down and you're completely exhausted. And you might even burn out in various areas, whether it's spending time with your friends or your career or some hobby that you were pursuing. You might get to the point where you just feel completely exhausted and burnt out. But that's not how an enlightened being functions. And in order for you to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to function more and more through the mind as an enlightened being, where you can understand this balance and find this middle way where things can be effortless. And now when you get on that path and you're noticing that you have your finances taken care of, you have your personal life and your social life taken care of, you're working on the path to enlightenment and developing your meditation practice and all these other teachings, you should feel this peace and this joy in the mind because you've got things well balanced. And now you can just walk forward in that way. And then you pay attention to what you're doing. And if at any point any of these areas start to feel like you're not in the middle, you just make small adjustments and small tweaks in order to bring a particular aspect of your life to the middle. So when the Buddha teaches about the middle way, he specifically refers to the Eightfold Path, which is what I taught last week, where you're learning right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And each one of these factors or each one of these steps are like little dials that you're dialing in closer and closer in your practice, and you're getting a better and better quality mind. This is organized in these three categories of wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. And as you dial this in closer and closer, you'll feel this middle way. When you first start practicing these teachings, something like right speech, for example, it can be a real struggle. It can feel quite difficult because your mind isn't used to this natural law of karma and practicing it with the wise decisions that the Buddha shares with you about things like right speech. So you might find it really challenging to dial in right speech in certain relationships that you have. In other relationships, it might be quite easy. But as you develop your life practice more and more, you'll notice that right speech becomes easier and easier with everybody in your life, because not only are you practicing right speech, but you're practicing the meditation and all the other teachings that are part of the mental discipline. So when you're bringing down your cravings, desires, attachments, you're no longer chasing after the objects of your affection, and you're bringing up this energy and this motivation and this initiative to actually practice something like right speech. By the time you dial this in really closely, you should be able to practice right speech effortlessly. But of course, that's going to take months and maybe even years for you to be able to fully develop that. So you take your time and you gradually work towards the goal, realizing that if you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind and you're chasing after things and you start restraining the mind and pulling that back, the mind just doesn't go right to the middle. It's not like you're going to let go of your craving and your clinging and go right to the middle the first time you try to do that. Oftentimes what the mind does when you're letting go of craving, desire, attachment is it overshoots the middle and it swings like a pendulum over here to being kind of indifferent or lethargic or lackluster or dull. And then when you notice that the mind is over there, that's not the middle. So you start arising a bit of energy and motivation and initiative and enthusiasm. And now you start bringing the mind back over here, and you might overshoot the middle again. And you might start noticing that the mind goes into a little bit of craving, not as much as you had before, but maybe it overshoots the middle a bit. And now you start letting that go. And now you kind of overshoot the middle again. And you go a little bit over to this dullness and lethargic condition, but not as much as you had before. So as a pendulum kind of swings back and forth, and then eventually it gets into the middle and it hits that middle, that's essentially what the mind's going to be doing with each one of these areas, whether it's your finances, your social life, or any other aspect of your life, including your journey to enlightenment. When you first learned about enlightenment, you might have shot out of the gate and started reading, starting at 10 classes, maybe a lot. Maybe you tried to hurry up and build up your meditation practice, perhaps. And you did that for a period of time, and then you realize, this doesn't work. And now maybe you kind of slacked off of that, and you might have went over to a little bit of, indifference or a little bit of lethargic condition or dullness where you didn't really practice meditation or read at all. And now maybe you're starting to come back into attending classes again and maybe doing some meditation again. So your mind has to kind of swing like this pendulum until it finds the middle. And when you do, you'll notice the peacefulness and the joy. It's almost like the mind is taking a breath of fresh air. So this is what I have to share with you guys on this particular topic. As I shared, it's very straightforward for me to be able to teach it to you. It's very short, it's very simple, but it's the power of implementing it in your life that you're going to see the real profoundness of this teaching of walking the middle way. So what I'd like to do with the rest of our class is give you guys the opportunity to ask any and all questions that you like about the middle way or the Eightfold Path or any other aspect of the path to enlightenment. If you have questions specifically about the middle way, you're welcome to put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom and ask those questions. You can even ask any other questions that you have about the path to enlightenment as well. Sometimes when I introduce this, students have certain example in their life and they would like to just kind of check in and see if that's the middle way for them. Or they might be challenged with finding the middle with a particular topic of their life. And they might share examples of what they're experiencing and trying to get some guidance on how to find the middle with a particular topic in their life. So if you guys would like to ask any of those questions, again, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions yet. Let's see. Just make sure I'm looking everywhere. Okay, it looks like Francis has a question. Go ahead, Francis.
Okay, I got to understand the middle way as when one's mind actually is at peace with yourself, like peaceful, calm. I felt there a couple of times where in the day I feel very at peace with myself. So does that mean that I'm in the middle way?
In that particular instant, in that present moment, yes. But in order to experience that peace and that joy permanently in the enlightened mental state, you would need to be practicing the middle way, extensively for a long-term period. And then you'll experience the peace and the joy permanently from the time of enlightenment forward. So if you're noticing that for a few hours or a few minutes or a few days or weeks that your mind is quite peaceful, in that period of time, your mind is in the middle and you're practicing the middle way. But then if something pops up and your mind becomes discontent in that situation, your mind's not yet in the middle. And that's what you'd like to refine it and bring it to the middle in that particular situation. So now you can get these longer and longer periods of time where there is peacefulness and joy in the mind.
Actually, I don't know how I got into that state. Sometimes it does happen that couple of days in a row that I feel so at peace with myself, where things doesn't get me agitated and all that. I just see it the way it is, and like you said, I just cut it off and let it go, and I go back into my so-called my own breathing. Although I'm not meditating, but I tell myself, okay, just breathe normal, in and out and all that. So is there a way is this the way to do it?
Yeah, what you would like to do is gradually build up your practice of the Eightfold Path, all those steps that I taught last week to include your meditation practice. But there's that mental discipline section, there's the moral conduct, and there's the wisdom. So you're working on these things, you're not mastering one before you move on to the other. You're dialing them all in at different times. So you might be developing your meditation practice, and you might be developing your mindfulness, for example. And then whenever you see any discontentedness arising, you're working on cutting that off. All the while, you might be working on your moral conduct of developing your right speech, right action, and right livelihood. When the Buddha taught, he would teach people to develop right view first, and that was like the first step on the path to enlightenment. And then from there, you would develop your moral conduct, which of course you need the right intention in order to do that. Because as long as you're putting harm out into the world through your moral conduct, then that harm is going to keep coming back to you. So you'd like to be developing those factors on the Eightfold Path. But then as various topics come up, you would like to be able to look at the middle way and think about that, right? So let's just say you're looking to buy a brand new car and it's time for you to buy a brand new car. And maybe your mind's thinking about buying a 30-year-old car that's really old and dilapidated, and you're thinking about that and you realize, well, is this really the middle, right? Because maybe I'm going to have to spend a lot of money on maintenance. But then maybe your mind goes to buying this luxury car where it's so expensive, it would put a lot of burden on your finances. And you're like, that's not the middle either. I wouldn't feel peaceful. I wouldn't feel joyful having this huge debt that I have to pay every month. So maybe what I'll do is I'll buy this kind of car that's kind of in the middle for my finances, where maybe it's 3 or 4 or 5 years old, or maybe it's a brand new car, but it's a lesser price. And you find that middle with that particular purchase of a car, for example. And then other things that might be coming up in your life, maybe spending time with your parents or your life partner. You just kind of look at your life and see, do you feel at ease? Do you feel peace? Do you feel joy with the amount of time you're spending with your parents and your life partner and your children or anything else that's going on in your life? You would like to be looking at what you're doing. And if at any point you're feeling stress or anxiety or any kind of other discontentedness, this is an indication to you that your mind's not in the middle and that you need to bring it to the middle. So you need to adjust it. So if you're feeling stressed and anxious about spending time with your parents, then you know your mind's not in the middle with that particular thing. Or if you're feeling stressed about your finances and your bills, then you know you're not in the middle. You need to throttle that back. So if at any point that you see any kind of discontentedness, this is the indication to you that you're not in the middle on that particular topic, and you would like to look at that topic closely and see, how can I bring this to the middle so that I can feel peace and joy with what I'm doing here in this situation?
It means the middle way is like to not be an extreme or what. Like I know that the Buddha always says that not be extreme, too much or too little of it. Just stay in somewhere in the middle where how shall I say this? It's just a balance of things that, for example, you're saying that spending time with my parents. I may not be spending every day with my parents, but I choose to spend only a few days in a week, and then the other days, I'll bring them over to my brother's place. So I have a peace of mind, I have my own freedom and my room to do what I want to do without having to worry about taking care of my parents and all that. So would that be something like the middle way?
Yeah, that sounds like you're trying to find the middle with that particular situation, and then realizing that might change. That might change as you have more time. Maybe you spend time with your parents, and in situations where you don't have time, maybe you take them to your brother's house and he gets to spend time with them. This is perfect, and understanding that there's this impermanence that's going to determine for you what you can do at any particular time.
Okay, I got it. Thank you so much.
Sure. And I can give you guys another example here with my life. And I see there's some a question here from Steve as well in Zoom. Let me give you another example from my life that I just thought about. So I've been teaching now for many years, of course. And after COVID, the end of last year, 2022, there was a time where I was like, all right, well, I need to start teaching classes again, because I was teaching primarily online for about 3 years. So for 2023, I put some classes on the schedule at the temple for me to be able to teach here in Chiang Mai. So what I did is I was kind of using 2023 as kind of a guide to see what kind of schedule could I really support in terms of my energy, in terms of my ability to teach, and in terms of balancing that with my family life and all the other responsibilities that I have. So what I did is I laid down a bunch of classes on the calendar, and then I started teaching them. And in some cases, what I was doing is I was teaching a class back to back, where I'll be teaching a course Monday through Friday, and then I'll be teaching another course after that Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, of course, I'm teaching online and I'm teaching at the temple. So there was times where I was teaching, 9 days straight, and there were some times where I was teaching like 16 days straight. And I was doing this throughout the year, and it was just fine. But then what I noticed is towards the middle of this year, I noticed that the ones where I was teaching 16 days straight, at the end of that, I would need a whole lot of sleep for like 2 or 3 days, where I was feeling a little bit tired, a little bit sleepy in the mind. So what I did is I adjusted the schedule so that now I'm not teaching those 16 days straight anymore. I used to do this when I was in America, but I was a lot younger back then. So now I've got my schedule organized for the rest of this year and all of next year, where there's no time that I'm teaching more than 9 days straight, because that is just fine for me to teach kind of a Saturday, Sunday, then a Monday through Friday, and then another Saturday and Sunday. And then there's a break there. And the way that I teach my classes, like Monday through Friday, it's 9 a.m. to 12, and then there's an hour and a half lunch break, and then I finish at 3 p.m. and I have the whole rest of the day to myself. And then the same thing on the weekends. I teach at the temple from 9 a.m. to about 11 a.m. and then I have the whole day to spend with family or students if they need help. And then I start teaching again at 9 p.m. and then I teach until whenever class is over. So I've got my life balance where I'm doing a little bit of work in the morning. I've got the day to spend time with family or what have you. And then I do some work in the evening as well. And then throughout the week, when I'm not teaching, I have student appointments, and I have 2 appointments in the morning and 2 appointments in the evening. And then in the daytime, I'm taking care of my son, taking him to school, doing things with him after school and things like this. So I've organized my schedule in such a way that I'm available to the students, I'm available to my family. I've got some private time for myself as well. And all of this is well balanced over a week or over a month. And where I saw that this had kind of got a little bit, out of whack, then I just adjusted it because I noticed that, I was kind of sleepy. It was last month or the month before that. I was noticing I was a little bit sleepy after a 16-day teaching. And I was like, let me fix this. So I adjusted the schedule so that I wouldn't need to teach 16 days in a row anymore. So you might kind of put something down on a schedule like I did, thinking that this will be just fine. And then as you're doing that ebb and flow that I talk about, I kind of observed what was going on in my life and in my mind. I was like, let me give myself a little bit more breathing room here. So now I'll teach 1 week, and then I'll have kind of like a week that's a little bit of a lighter schedule. And then I'll teach another week, and then I'll have a little bit of a week that's a little bit of a lighter schedule. And this is something that you guys can do with your own life and whatever you've got going on in your life as well. So let's see what Steve's asking here in Zoom. He says, teacher, you mentioned swinging like a pendulum. I am finding that since working to follow the path, my mind seems to be fighting it sometimes. For example, during mindfulness meditation, the harder I focus on the breath, the more my mind tries to daydream. On balance, I feel that I am making great progress with my practice, but these pendulum type swings are pretty aggressive. It would be great to get some better balance sometimes. Yeah, so there you can see that when you're trying to force it, that's the craving, desire, attachment. That's the forcing. That's when you're on one side, right? And now as you let that go, the mind swings back to the other side. So that mindfulness that you're building to be able to see that swinging is actually really good. The fact that your mind is not yet where you'd like it to be, that's okay. Of course, you just started within the last few months learning with me. So the fact that you can actually see that swinging, then you know that what I'm sharing with you is the truth because you've learned it because I just taught it to you. And then you reflected on it based on your own direct experience. And now what you need to do is start practicing more and more where you're not forcing your meditation, but instead you're easing the mind into meditation. You're gradually bringing the mind to the breath and not trying to force it and control it. But then also if you notice the mind swinging to the other side where it's, dull or lethargic, you'd like to bring it back and bring it more to the middle. This fine tuning of the mind, it happens consistently for a long-term period. For years, you're going to be doing this. It's not going to be just a couple of weeks or a couple of months and boom, you get to the middle. So the fact that you're able to see this swinging and you're able to potentially start tweaking it now through your practice, that's what you would like to be able to do. So you're not going to be able to master this today, tomorrow, or next week, but this teaching you can gradually apply over the coming weeks and months and even years to then be able to find the middle more and more with each individual topic that you're faced with. And here it sounds like the meditation is what you're focusing on right now. All right, you're welcome, Steve. Let me see if you guys have any other questions here. I'm not seeing any other questions, so perhaps you guys must be understanding this to a certain degree. All right, well, this is all I have to share with you guys. As I mentioned, it's a very short teaching, but the power of this teaching is in its practice. That if you can learn how to apply this to your practice more and more, this is where you're going to really see the benefits and the results in practicing the middle way. You should start noticing that your mind's either craving or longing or yearning and chasing after things, or you're maybe indifferent and you're kind of lackluster and dull and lethargic about things. And where you see your mind's on either side of that with any particular topic, whether you're dull and lethargic and unmotivated, or whether you're chasing something, you know that your mind's not in the middle. And if you're noticing discontentedness arising, you know for sure your mind's not in the middle. And you like to bring it more and more to the middle so that you can then be able to practice that. It looks like we have another question maybe coming in. Oh, Sophia. Okay. Let's see. Sophia, hello, teacher. I have a question about career. There is a opportunity for promotion application, but I feel hesitant to apply. On the one hand, it takes effort to prepare, and I'm afraid of failure and feel not qualified. But on the other hand, I feel I have to give it a try and fight for it. How to make a right decision? How to find the middle way under this circumstance? Okay, so what you would like to do, Sophia, is understand that anything that you pursue in life, if you fall short of it, you haven't failed, because the ultimate goal in life is for you to cultivate wisdom. You're always looking to cultivate wisdom. That's what's going to create improved results in your life. So let's just say you apply to this job and you don't get it. Well, you've learned something along the way. So in that respect, you haven't failed anything at all. You might not have got the ultimate thing that you maybe were working towards, but you at least acquired wisdom. That's what you're looking for. So updating your resume, updating your CV, applying, going into interview, talking to the managers and the bosses, seeing how to progress in this career, getting feedback. If you don't get the job, getting feedback on how you could apply and improve your application for the future. This is all wisdom that you will acquire. Whereas if you don't apply, you're not going to get that wisdom to either apply at this company or some other company. So I would encourage you to do these kinds of things, because as you apply, you're going to cultivate wisdom. Also, don't think about it as you're fighting for something. You never want to get in the situation where you're fighting, because there the mind is actually forcing it, right? You would like to gradually work towards it. You would like to look at the requirements of the job, maybe talk to somebody who's actually doing the job now, maybe talk to the hiring managers and see if you can get some insight on what's required and the skills that are required for the job. And then if you don't have those skills, look to get those skills and work towards the goal. Don't fight for it, because fighting isn't going to produce anything beneficially, but instead just work towards it. Oftentimes the mind is afraid of failure, because if you're chasing something with craving and you get it, you're going to feel these pleasant feelings. But if you're chasing after this new job and you don't get it, you're going to get these painful feelings of sadness, anger, and others. But that's because you're used to doing things with craving. What you would like to do is learn how to progress towards a new job and a new promotion as a goal, objective, or interest. So that if you get it, all right, wonderful, I got it because I worked hard for this and I did all my research, I updated my resume, I have all these skills and abilities, and now I acquired the goal, objective, or interest that I was working towards. But if you work towards it as a goal, objective, or interest and you don't get the new promotion, then look at it like, okay, this was a learning opportunity. This was an opportunity for me to grow my wisdom. You haven't failed. So therefore, if you don't set your expectation or your wants or your longing and yearning that you've got to have this job and it's the best thing in the world and I can only feel happy if I get this job. That's the craving. You're not interested in that, because if you don't get the job, you're going to end up in the painful feelings. So if you're going to walk forward and apply for this job, then do it with a goal, objective, or interest to acquire wisdom. And whatever you do, whether you actually acquire the job or you don't, you've acquired wisdom, so therefore you've won in this situation. And now you can be at ease and you can be peaceful and joyful whether you get the job or you don't. Because if you don't get the job, it's not the end of the world. You have gained some wisdom and you learn from something, and now you'll use that wisdom in the future to be able to apply it to some future opportunity. And that's what you should keep your mind focused on, is gaining wisdom along the journey. Okay, it looks like, Francis, you have another question as well. You're welcome, Sophia. Pleased to help you.
Okay, this again about the middle way. I think I remember you taught in the previous classes about, being in seclusion and silence versus the time you go out with friends and go out to the world. he said, don't stay at home all the time. He was saying that Buddha didn't stay in the cave, he also went out to the community and all that. So my thinking is that I subscribe to the idea of being in silence and in solitude, meditating, spending time alone myself to meditate and to read the books and all that. And also sometimes I go out with friends, my best buddies and all that, for some drinks and all that. So and then one time I thought myself that am I taking too much time in seclusion, or am I going out too much? So how do I find a balance in this, like a middle way?
The way you find the balance is whether your mind's at peace and if you have joy, because that's the indicator that's going to tell you if your mind's in the middle. It should feel like you've taken a breath of fresh air. So you might go through a period of time where you are at home more frequently and you are alone more frequently and you are kind of involved in reading books and coming to classes and meditating. You don't have very much social interaction. You might go through a period of time like that. I went through a period of time for about 3 years like that as I was building up my practice, and maybe even a little bit longer. So this is very common to kind of have less interaction and really kind of go within and kind of be introspective. But then eventually, as you start building up your practice more and more, you can kind of step back out into the world and have certain relationships and be involved in the community and things like this. So this is that ebbing and flowing of the middle way that you'll notice that you might need to be a little bit more secluded at periods of time. And then other times you might need to go out into the world and spend more time with other people. But whenever you're doing it, you should feel like the mind is in the middle, that you should feel that peace and you should feel the joy. You should feel effortless. You should feel like the mind is taking a breath of fresh air. Now, the caveat that I'll share with this is that if you have a craving, desire, attachment that is producing some kind of fear, like say you have a social anxiety and your mind just doesn't want to go outside and you feel very uncomfortable going outside. Well, if you continue to stay inside and you never went outside, your mind's going to maintain those cravings, desires, attachments, those fears and those anxieties are still going to be there. So what you're going to hear me talk about when we get to chapter 13 and in chapter 17 is about putting the mind into the situation that it fears so that it can overcome that uncomfortableness. And now by eliminating the craving, desire, attachment, you can eliminate the social anxiety, for example. So you'll notice in terms of this middle way is what I'm talking about is finding this middle. But then in terms of getting to the middle, if you're noticing that you're very secluded and you're uncomfortable going out, that doesn't mean that your mind's in the middle. It means that there's some craving, desire, attachment that the mind has and it's feeling awkward or anxiety by going out in social situations. So you're going to need to put the mind in those situations occasionally in order to overcome those cravings and overcome and eliminate the understanding what the middle way is versus putting the mind in the situation that it needs to be in order to overcome certain cravings or certain fears. Let's see, I'm just looking on social media here to see if we have any more questions. Yeah, I'm not seeing any more questions. So I guess you guys have answers to what it is that you guys are looking to learn at this particular time. So what I'll do then is just kind of wrap this up by sharing, keep looking for the middle way, keep walking towards the middle. If you're just starting out, that means that you're probably working on the Eightfold Path. You're working on learning the wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline and dialing that in closer and closer. And understand that there is going to feel a bit of a struggle and a little bit of a challenge and difficult here and there. That's what it means to do that inner work and bring your practice up, because the mind being in the unenlightened state with pollutions in the mind, it's going to feel uncomfortable and it's going to maybe not want to make its way to this improved state of mind. It might be interested to stay in this complacency. But what you would like to do is develop your life practice more and more, that you're able to practice going forward in the middle way, where you're gradually reading, you're gradually coming to classes or listening to the replays, you're listening to the podcast, you're getting personal guidance, you're developing your meditation practice and things like this, slowly but surely building this up and getting more and more comfortable with these changes that you're going to be making in your life to move the mind to the enlightened mental state. Because remember, the mind in the unenlightened state doesn't like impermanence. So if you start implementing all these really drastic, significant changes into your life, your mind's probably going to reject this. So if you're trying to make certain changes in your life and in your life practice, you'd like to kind of make those gradually so the mind almost doesn't even realize what you're doing. And this is the middle way. Whereas if you were to make significant changes, bam, 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 that's not the middle way. That can be craving, desire, attachment. But if you weren't really making any changes and you weren't learning any wisdom to improve, that's not the middle way either. So you start gradually introducing things into your practice, whether it's meditation or the moral conduct section or the various aspects of the path. You just gradually start tweaking your life practice little by little, slowly but surely, working towards the goal that you see in terms of the path to enlightenment that's laid out in this book series and in all these programs and courses and retreats that I teach. And as you need help to try to figure this out, you can reach out and get help. So next week in our group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 7, which is titled The 5 Precepts, a Householder's Guide to Daily Practice. This is where you're going to learn 5 very impactful decisions that you can be making in your life, that if you lack wisdom of the 5 precepts, you could be making unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. But if you cultivate the wisdom around the 5 precepts, you can now practice discernment or wisdom, wise decision making that then produces wholesome results. If you've heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, this isn't what the Buddha actually taught. That sounds like a bunch of rules. It sounds like commandments. It sounds like black and white. The Buddha didn't speak that way. He didn't create rules or commandments. He wasn't trying to force you to do anything particular. Instead, what the 5 precepts are going to help you do is cultivate wisdom around the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result, so that you can see more and more clearly this natural law, that it's not punishments and rewards, it's not mystical and magical, it's cause and effect, or the results of your decisions, this action and result. So the words that the Buddha uses in the 5 precepts are very illuminating. And I'm going to share with you his actual words on the 5 precepts so that you can see what he taught. And then you can reflect on that to independently verify it. And then you can practice it and see the improvement in your life as you're practicing more and more of the 5 precepts. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be in part 3 of our 4-part series on Buddhist chanting. So I'm going to be teaching students Buddhist chanting, and you guys are welcome to attend live, either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m., or you're welcome to listen to the replay of the Buddhist chanting, or even next Sunday's class on chapter 7. So thank you all for deciding that you would like to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. Thank you for your questions and your participation in the class. As you need help, remember you can ask questions in class. You can post your questions in the online community in Facebook. You can send me private messages, and you can schedule personal guidance sessions. And all of this is offered to you at no cost. All the books, all the classes, and everything is available to you. So I'm here to help you as you decide to reach out and ask for help. So thank you all for joining. I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.